Poke the Bear is brought to you by Prize Picks.
And welcome into Poke the Bear episode 377, part of the CLNS Media Network. If you have time, please subscribe to the Bruins Ringside YouTube channel. We have daily content between Poke the Bear, Bruins Beat with Evan Marinofski, Pucks for the Haggs. We have you covered every step of the way this Bruins season, so please follow along with us over at YouTube. And if you don't like YouTube, you can subscribe and follow along over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever else you get your hockey podcasts. This episode is also brought to you by Prize Picks, the best way to win cash this football season. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. My name is Conor Ryan, and once again, we are joined by the esteemed, the ever-knowledgeable Ty Anderson of 98.5 The Sports Hub. Ty, how you doing?
What is going on today? How are we feeling?
Pretty good. A little tired, a little sleepy after that late game last night. I was over at Gillette, so I wasn't able to watch too much of the Bruins. I know you and Evan broke it
you missed
down.
a real humdinger.
I know, exactly. Well, I know you and Evan were busy talking hockey last night. How was your live stream experience? Were the commenters bullying you? Were they being mean? Were they being crotchety? Or were they nice?
No, they seem nice. I mean, I gotta say though, like I'm not used to a live stream. So here, like little inside baseball here. When I'm doing the hockey show on the air, I have to keep my phone face down. I have to turn my watch off, and I have to basically have everything on my laptop muted because if I get a text while I'm on the air, it will throw me off.
Mm-hmm.
I will lose my train of thought. It does happen. So when the comments kept popping up, I was getting a little frazzled because I was reading what they were saying while I was also speaking, and I just lost my train of thought. So I'm not good with that. That's what I'm learning about myself and about my life is that I am not doing well with that.
It's like the college football thing with like the stress meter where it's like the pressure ramps up as the game's going on. That's me when I look at the live stream comments, and it's more that they like have a funny comment that cracks me up and throws me off. Like when Evan and I did the live stream after the Ottawa game, where they lost, what was it, 7-1, 7-2? I think like there was like 5 comments like in all caps being like the piss and piss Bruins just covered in piss. I was just like, all right, like I can't like try to have like a coherent thought if that's just popping up on the screen like that. So cracks me up. I know I'm gonna get even more of those comments the next time I do a live stream, but not to go backwards here, but I think we'll start this episode off by reflecting a little bit about, obviously, the Bruins win streak comes to an end in Ottawa once again against a team that seems to have their number, especially up there. I would say in Ottawa, but it's in the middle of like nowhere. It's like the Foxborough equivalent of where they are. But you knew that loss was going to come eventually. You knew eventually the Bruins weren't going to have their A game, B game, what have you. Still frustrating, though, as far as this team with their knack so far this year of not getting those loser points. Like that is something where you knew the loss was coming, but man, you would like to see them at least gut through and get some points in the standings. That has been a recurring issue so far this year, I'd say.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I think that's that's what I said last night with Evan. You know, you got to get better at losing. And it sounds weird to say, but you know, I said it to him last night and I had to look it up today because I was curious. In 2015-16, the Bruins had a better record than Detroit, but Detroit had 2 overtime losses. So the Red Wings got in the playoffs and the Bruins did not. You know, like these things can bone you. You know, they can come back to hurt you in a number of ways. And so I do think that, you know, like you look at the record of the Boston Bruins right now, and it's a good record. You know, it's 11-8, like it's 3 games over 500. But you look at Ottawa is 9-5-4. Technically, they're 500, but they have as many points as you because they found ways to turn losses into overtime losses. And in this league, unfortunately, that does matter. And so, you know, this is something that I think is going to be worth watching. Perhaps not, you know, not as much in the sense that, like, you know, you got to worry about the teams behind you getting their act together. But if and when they do, you know, Tampa's got 2 OTLs. Toronto's got 2. I think Florida's got at least 1. So, like, you look at that and you're like, all right, like, those teams are finding ways to get points when they lose. That's something the Bruins have yet to do. They're one of 5 teams in the NHL so far that's yet to have an overtime loss. And so it sounds weird to say, but like you gotta string a few of those in there, along the way here to get some points.
Well, I think even when you look at the optics of it, right? Like this team has been a roller coaster. Whether you win 3 straight, you lose 6, you win 7, and as much as it feels like they're playing better hockey as of late, you still look at that record of 11-8, and 11-8 just feels like an ugly looking record, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It's like in like
It
baseball
does.
when you get to like April and May, and you don't know what to make of the team because like they're playing good baseball, but they're 15-11. You're like, oh, what the hell is this? And how much would
Yeah.
it change if the Bruins had 5 regulation losses and a few OT losses put in there? And I mean, how many games have we seen already? Ottawa is just the latest in a long line of games where you like to at least get a point out of it, right? Like look at the game against Tampa at home, the game against Florida at home, right? Where it was tied with 27 seconds to go, whatever it may be. That Ducks game where, you're at least able to get a point out of it. You bounce back against what is now looking like a very good Anaheim team. I don't know if that makes it less frustrating if you're the Bruins, where you lost a shootout to a team that has been killing it so far this year. But you've seen like the Bruins step up against other like established groups, right? They've handed Colorado their only regulation loss of the year. They've beat Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
If you're able to buoy that and mesh that with also some of these hard fought OT losses or shootout losses, it just make your overall record this year look a lot better. Like how much better would this team be if you just looked at the standings and they were, 11 wins, 4 regulation losses, and a couple more OT losses sprinkled in there? It feels a lot better than 11-8. So it's not the end all be all, but those are the situations where if we get to March and April and this team is in the playoff picture, hovering around the playoff picture, those 4, 5, 6 points that you left on the board are gonna sting you once you look back on it.
Yeah, I think that, for the Bruins right now, like, yeah, things are changing in terms of how you feel, right? Like that Anaheim team, they got one of the best goal differentials in hockey. I think only Colorado, I want to say, I think only Colorado's been better. Colorado's been a machine, right? And you mentioned the Bruins did beat them in regulation here in Boston. And so there's a lot to like. It's just like, this is not where I thought we'd be nitpicking the value of the losses, good losses and bad losses. I was just hoping they were going to win some damn games, but I do think that it's a sneaky problem for them in a lot of ways. And, we talked about it last night. Evan and I did, like, last night was classic Bruins or typical 2025-26 Boston Bruins, where they fight till the final horn. They bring it close. They make it a game, but you don't get anything to show for it, right? And I thought it was telling that after that game, both Geeky and Hampus Lindholm are kind of admitting, like, we got to get some points out of these games. Like, it's okay if we lose, but we got to get points out of them. I think that everything is going really well right now, I think, for the Bruins, based on where we thought they'd be, especially after losing 6 in a row. Right. But this is the thing that I think they look over their shoulder and they realize that Tampa should get it together. Florida, while banged up, should get it together. Toronto, we're going to have to wait and see what happens there. But, like, I think they themselves kind of realize, like, oh, we can't let, like, we've probably left 7 or 8 points on the board already, and that can't happen to us again, because it kind of happened last year before the sell-off happened, I would say.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. So we'll see if they can right the ship on Saturday against Montreal. We'll talk a little bit more about that matchup, which all of a sudden now is one of the more anticipated games, I'd probably say, of the year. And again, hockey's better when both the Bruins and Montreal are both on the come up. And so far, it seems to be the case this year. We'll talk more about that. But looking at the Bruins lineup, curious as to what your thoughts are about how this team is playing right now, where guys are fitting in. It does feel like, based on the lines from today, that Jonathan Aspero is going to be back in the lineup. Yoki Haru is probably the odd man out there. So the third pairing is going to be Lohrei and Aspero. I don't think Aspero's done anything to take himself out of the lineup, right? I think he's been as advertised. But what do you think of that move? And are there any other tweaks you'd like to see from this team, or are you kind of okay with letting it ride, especially maybe up front?
I want to see Aspero back in there. I think Yoki Haru now, it's been 10 straight games without a point. I know he's not going to be a 40-point kind of guy, but you do rely on him to transport the puck, to make some good decisions. I feel like he's just been a little, I don't know, like out of sorts, like a step behind, a beat behind. he's a guy that, like, were they in love with him, re-signing him? I don't know. Or was he just the best option available on the right side, and you had to keep him because it was either that or, Lord knows who, back there, Billy Sweezy, maybe.
Evan Marinofski.
Evan Marinofski. I mean, you can move me on the right side. I'm a left shot D, but you can move me on the right side if you want. I don't love my odds. No, but I feel like this is where their complexion is a little strange on the back end, right? Like, this is the only pitfall of putting Zadorov and McAvoy together, is that your third pairing becomes a little bit of an unknown. You either can go hyper offense with Lohrei and Jokiharju and sacrifice a lot of the defensive end, whatever you want to call it, know-how, poise, whatever. Or you got to give it to Aspero, who's still kind of finding his footing here in the NHL. And I've liked what I've seen from him, but you go Lohrei, Aspero. Okay, well, there's not a lot of experience back there. Like, this is the only downfall of putting Zadorov and McAvoy together, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, exactly. And again, I feel like if you're the Bruins, you probably take those headaches, I guess, if it means that Zadorov and McAvoy are still playing at a high level. And the same, I think, with Lindholm, with Peak. But there are a lot of question marks there. You can make pros and cons for however you want to build up that third pair, right? But it does feel like I really liked Aspero's game. This is a guy that I thought was solid during camp. He stuck around. And it's almost like I feel like you need that steadying presence. And I think especially a guy like Marco Sturm really likes a guy like Aspero, where he's physical, but also he closes in well. I thought like he's adjusted to the speed of the NHL really well. Clearly Marco Sturm really likes that type of player. So I think it's good that he's going to get back in the lineup. Be curious to see how he does with Lohrei in that spot. Because again, I think to what we said last week, there's still going to be growing pains with Lohrei. I still don't feel like he's a guy that is going to be, it doesn't help you, or especially him as a player, if he's going to be sitting out multiple games as well, even if he has some more of these growing pains or these warts in the D zone. So I think it is going to be an ongoing process. And it's curious as to like what exactly like the long-term solution is there. Is it Lohrei, Jokiharju down the stretch? Because Lohrei is a guy you ideally want to have as part of your next grouping, I imagine. And you have Jokiharju signed for 3 years. It's what they do, I think, moving forward with that spot is going to be very curious, because it's almost like in an ideal world, if you're like filling out your roster in the next year or two, like Peak would be like, I think like the ideal where your team is at like full strength and you've got more guys in place. I feel like Peak is the ideal third pairing guy that can like anchor a third pair. He's just being put in that spot right now. But what happens then where you've got Jokiharju under contract? That's why I thought he was good last year. Jokiharju was Zadorov, but it does make kind of a square peg in a round hole as far as maybe looking ahead as to how that grouping does kind of map itself out.
Yeah, I will say I do think that, to your point, Peak should be a third pairing guy. I do think he's hanging right now, though. I think he and Lindholm have been a good pairing. So, I'm a little bit reluctant to change that. But yeah, like this is sort of, I think this is their issue, right? Like, and I say this all the time. Like, Sturm, when he speaks, has very coded language, but if you read between the lines, you can understand what he's saying and what he's trying to sort of emphasize. I just wonder if guys like Jokiharju and Lohrei are fits for what Marco wants out of his D, right? He talks about closing fast. He talks about supporting and not leading the rush.
Yeah.
He talks about being aggressive. Like, those two guys, I don't think are ever going to be that guy for Marco Sturm, right? And so, how do you massage that? How do you build that out to deal with that? Because I don't think you're going to trade Lohrei right now. I think you still want to see if you can squeeze something out of him there. As you mentioned, Jokiharju's re-signed here, so you're not going to trade him, I wouldn't think. But like, you got to find a way to make it work, right? And so how do you best do that? Because it is what it is, right? Like, this is kind of what I think Marco was saying to me when I asked about making changes, where he's like, there's not much I can do. Like, I feel like that's a great example. That third pairing is a perfect example of there's not much I can do. It's either the three guys we have, I break up my super great top pairing right now, or I bring Michael Callahan or somebody up from Providence. Like, there's not a lot of options there in terms of completely rebuilding it.
Yeah, no, I agree. So see how that kind of pans out. As far as up front, I know there's still a little bit of a ways to go before guys like Elias Lindholm, Casey Middlestad are back. I know Lindholm skated a few days ago before practice, so that's at least a step in the right direction. Marco Sturm mentioned earlier this week that Middlestad's officially week to week, but also kind of, added on that he's more along than they thought. So, like, I don't know if that means you're going to see him at least like start skating next week or what have you, but it does feel like those are guys that you hope aren't out for an extended stretch. I know it's going to be coming up on about 2 weeks now since Lindholm went down. I know this is probably looking ahead, and it's probably more of a topic for a couple of weeks from now. But when you look at that forward core and how guys like, Husindinov have been solid on the top line, you've seen like Steves contribute on Thursday. Not saying that like, sorry, Casey, you're on the bench now because of Alex Steves, but how like that domino effect does kind of work its way out once those guys are back. It's going to be interesting because the one line I don't want to touch right now is that Jeannot, Kastelik, Minton line, because like they've been money, and then like however that fourth line sorts itself out, you still got the stalwarts, the Corrales, the Eastmonts, those types of players that I don't think you have to really worry about. So how exactly, I think, especially a guy like Husindinov, where he fits in, is going to be really interesting to see.
Yeah, I'm a little reluctant to move Husindinov back into a fourth line role or healthy scratch role. I think you're getting something out of him. And I, I said it on the pod previously, but like putting him back on the fourth line, that's kind of the mistake that the Wild made, right? And you're finally reaping the rewards of it. And so I don't really want to go back to that if I have the ability to. Do I look at him perhaps more as maybe a second line wing with Zacha and Arvidsson? It'd be a smaller line, but it'd be a fast line. It'd be another kind of speed and tempo line for them. I would also argue though that Middlestad hasn't really done anything to deserve a demotion. I mean, he's been pretty solid this year, especially after the scratch. He's responded in a way that you want him to respond. And I think the other thing with Middlestad too that is kind of flown under the radar, he's been very good at the dot this year, 57%, something like that. Like he's winning faceoffs, and that's been a problem for this team at times, especially post Lindholm and situationally losing a lot of draws. So there's something there that, I don't want to demote that either. So where are you looking? Like this is it's a good problem to have, obviously. And these things tend to sort themselves out. But the guy that it's so like, I think Kastelik, you can put him down and everything's going to remain the same. Like he's not going to sulk. He's not going to change how he plays. It's just, is that the best message to send when he's actually producing right now in this elevated role? This is a really hard one. I would try to find a way to keep Husindinov in a third or second line role if I'm the Bruins right now.
I think it shows you just how much things have changed, and it's not to say that this is going to be the same discussion we're having in March and April, right? But when you look at where you were seeing this roster, whether it's in the summertime, whether it's training camp, preseason, to now we're like a few weeks ago, we're like, we can't break up the Middlestad Zacha Arvidsson line. They're killing it right now. And now we can't break up the Jeannot, Fraser Minton, Mark Kastelik line. And whereas you asked Bruins fans in August, like, guys, don't worry. Like, I know you guys love like the Coyle, Heinen, Johansson line. Let's sell you on the Jeannot, Minton, Kastelik. Like, what the fuck is going on?
Right.
And they're playing great. Like they're doing their job. Even like Mikey Eyssimont, who I think early on the year, you're like, is this guy moving the needle? He's been kind of more of a pest, and he's on pace for like 35 points, the same as Jeannot. It's a good problem to have if you're the Bruins. All these guys seem to be pulling on the rope right now.
No, it is. And this is why I always try to say, like, these things tend to take care of themselves, right? Like, right as someone's getting healthy, someone else will go down.
Yeah.
It is funny, though, to your point, though, like, they got to bring up Poitras and Lysell, and I'm kind of like, where are they going to play right now? Like, because you got guys who are producing, If Arvidsson was the Arvidsson that you saw in Edmonton, who didn't have a hold on his lineup spot and, couldn't play without McDavid or Draisaitl, it's a different story, but he's producing right now. Same thing with Zacha. I'm not rushing to trade him right now because he's playing well and the team is winning games. And so that makes it harder to do that. Kastelik, same thing. Minton is hanging in there. I think Minton has probably eclipsed Poitras on the organizational depth chart in terms of prospects. I feel like that's happened. And so, we entered the year saying like, oh, they got to play these guys. The guys that you would have to bump out are playing too good right now. They're playing too well. You can't logically sit those players. And so it's a whole new cauldron of problems for the Boston Bruins, but these are problems that teams want to have, I would say.
Yeah, no, good problem to have for sure. We'll see how it develops moving forward and see who rises up or down the depth chart. So we're going to talk a little bit more about this team before we do that. Let's take a quick break. Hear from our good friends over at Prize Picks. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. The hard-hitting football action is even better with Prize Picks. The weather might be changing, but the feeling of being right never gets old. So keep the season rolling on Prize Picks by getting $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5. There's plenty of new faces in New England, and it looks like names like Milton Williams, Stephon Diggs, and Travion Henderson are heating up as we get into some colder weather. If you want to make your pick on which player is about to go off on the gridiron, you have to go with Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to turn your sports knowledge into cash. With millions of members, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players' stat projections. If you get your picks right, you could cash in. Prize Picks is the only app that offers stacks, meaning you can pick the same player up to 3 times in the same lineup. Want to pick more on Josh Allen's passing yards, rushing yards, and touchdowns? Now you can pick all of them in the same lineup, only on Prize Picks. You can also follow other Prize Picks players directly on the app and copy their lineups in one click. Whether it's a friend, a celebrity, or just someone whose picks you like, hit the follow button and check out every lineup they create in the new feed tab on Prize Picks. And it's not just football. On Prize Picks, you can mix and match player projections from different sports. Combine your favorite football players with players from basketball, hockey, esports, and much more. There's no shortage of ways to participate in Prize Picks. This week, I'm looking at the board. I'm going to cover all of my bases. I've got Jaylen Brown for more than 4.5 3-pointers. And I'm going to be all in on Drake May against Cincinnati, where I could probably throw for 4 touchdowns against that defense. I'm taking the quarterback for more than 300 passing yards, the first time in his career, in Week 12 against the Bengals. So download the Prize Picks app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS on the Prize Picks app to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Shout out once again to our good friends over at Prize Picks. Ty, we're going to take a bit of a look across the league right now, more focusing in especially on Toronto Maple Leafs. And they have not been that good this year. I think Toronto Maple Leafs fans are freaking out. They lose in overtime to the Kings last night. Austin Matthews is banged up. Their goaltending has been bad. And that is good news if you're the Bruins, because you also have the first-round pick. I know it's top 5 protected, but I think when you look at the greater scope of Toronto's struggles right now, sure feels like the Bruins have made a lot of pretty good trades from that deadline teardown last March. And a lot of it is not just paying off in the future, it's paying off right now. And if you're the Bruins, and let's say you are exceeding expectations, even if Toronto is not getting the 6th pick in the draft, I don't think that's going to be realistic. When you look at how deep this draft is, if you can be a competitive team and you've got pick number 14 as well off of what Toronto has, beyond them also giving you Fraser Minton, I think you're seeing already the fruits of what the Bruins did in March really paying off for this club.
Oh, I would agree. I would agree entirely. And this is what makes their current situation a little bit more challenging, because if you could redo that and get even more assets for guys that we were just talking about, whether that's Arvidsson or Zaka, Middlestat, whoever, it's going to be hard to say no because of how well it's worked out so far with what you have right now. Like if you can get another version of a Fraser Minton, let's say it's a winger instead of a center, or a right shot D, which this franchise desperately needs, I think, beyond just Charlie McAvoy and Andrew Peeke, who's a pending UFA, you almost have to do that, right? I mean, it's just the temptation there is a lot to resist, I think, if you're the Bruins, and in your heart of hearts, you're not a true Stanley Cup winning kind of threat. That said, Toronto, I mean, I think Toronto wants a mulligan on that trade with Boston. I mean, how could you not, right? I like Brandon Carlo, one of the ultimate good guys in the sport. Didn't notice him in any of the good reasons in this past weekend's home and home between Boston and Toronto. I saw him give the puck away. I saw him get outworked and have a giveaway leading right to the Alex Steves goal in Boston. So I that's a trade I make 10 out of 10 now, right? And if you're the Leafs, though, Connor, what do you do? What can you do? What lever can you pull right now that you haven't already pulled at some point last, say 2 years?
Right. That's like the scary part, right? Is that, all right, you already were expecting this team to take a step back offensively because you don't have Mitch Marner now. But it's like, all right, you can be like, all right, they're going to have to change their approach under Craig Berube, right? They're going to have to be a tougher out, but like, they still got enough talent. They're almost kind of like what the Bruins should be. If you tighten up defensively and your goaltending holds like it did last year for Toronto, you got enough talent that whether it's on the power play, what have you, yeah, you're going to land enough punches. You're going to be third in the Atlantic at the very least, right? When you look at just how much talent they have there. But when Matthews is hurt, you have guys not buying in. The goaltending has regressed quite a bit. They're last in the league in goals allowed per game. Like, yeah, how do you get out of this like spin that they're in? That is, I think, the bigger issue, because you hear now from like all the insiders, on TSN talking about like, oh, they gotta see what's out there. Like, who are you trading? Like what first round picks do you have? They don't have the 2027 off of Scott Lawton, who is now hurt and also was a fourth line guy afterwards. Like, sooner or later, it's the same thing with the Bruins. You can push back of how long it's going to take, but sooner or later, the bill's going to come due. And for like Toronto, I think it's coming quicker than a lot of people expected. And if you don't have your first round picks, it's going to make it even worse, right? Like, the bill came due for the Bruins last year, and it sucked. They also had their own first round pick, which, at least you're able to draw those silver linings out of it. For Toronto, like, do you just like sell off more guys and like tank to the degree that you get a top 5 pick? Like, is that what you have to do? Are you trading like Cowan and NHL guys off your roster? Like, you trading Matthew Nyes for a top 4D or something like I don't know. Like, if I'm a Toronto Maple Leafs fan, I get that market and that fan base loves to freak out. I'd be freaking out if I was up in Toronto, because I don't know what the right solution is other than like we're in for some lean years and it's going to really suck because we can't accelerate to the same degree as a team like Boston, where last year they at least were like, we're ripping the Band-Aid off. We got our first round pick. Let's embrace the suck and see where we're at. And they're already on the upswing. Is Toronto going to be doing that? I don't really know.
I mean, the other problem for them too is this is where everything is in theory, going right for them. Everything is going right for them in the sense that Tavares is now making $4 million instead of making 9 or whatever it was, right?
And he's playing good hockey this year too. Like,
he's been great. He's been good for them. And every defenseman they have who makes over $3 million has a no trade clause or a no movement clause, so you can't really move them easily. You just signed Stolars, and he has a no trade clause, so you're not going to move him. Does anybody want Joseph Woll right now, given what the uncertainty that he's been and the narratives that have kind of followed him a little bit? You're not going to trade Max Domi because he represents a little bit of what the tenacity you want to play with. Like they don't have any
doing this after fighting Zadorov. Zadorov fell on him, but
they don't have any cap space. Like, we're talking about firing Berube. Okay, a year and a half ago, they all wanted Berube. They were talking about, Berube's a free agent head coach. You got to get him. Oh my God, how can we not get him? And now, what, 98 games later, you're getting rid of him? Like, that doesn't make a lot of sense. It's just, I don't know what they do. And to your point,
beat the board, baby.
That's sort of where it is, right? Like you have to ask yourself, okay, we like Craig Berube, but if we don't grab DeBoer, is somebody else going to scoop him up? And can we get a coach as good or better than Pete DeBoer? Unless the Panthers fire Paul Maurice, who's already been in Toronto, by the way, I don't know if you can. I really don't know if you can. And so there is that part of it. Like I'd be shocked, but I don't know what they do. I don't know what else they do. And I mean, this is a case of, I think, they are dug in so deep, and I don't know what they do to get out of this.
And dude, if Pete DeBoer hated Jake Onger, that man is going to roundhouse kick Wall and Stolars in the face. Like,
it's true.
And it's one of those, like, how they get out of this. I don't know, unless just Matthews goes on a heater when he's back, or like they just can rely on their power play, which also hasn't really been clicking so far this year. It doesn't help that you don't have Mitch Marner out there. Like, you miss him now after kind of running him out of town. like it wouldn't surprise me if this team like comes up short like of making the playoffs. Like the Bruins could easily have like the 10th, 11th, 12th pick if Toronto's playing like this. Like I just don't see where is Chris Tanev, who's 35, still a good player, but him coming back going to save your defense. Like it's just one of these guys going to get on a heater, right? Like I don't know how they right the ship just on looking at the personnel and how few options they really have to get themselves out of it. It's a great problem to have if you're the Bruins, where regardless of what you're doing, you're probably getting a quality pick and a draft where, I mean, again, it's going to look a lot different from the draft rankings now to when we get to April to when we get to June, but there's a lot of right shot D that could be like in the NHL in 2 years, if not sooner, that are all in that top 10, top 15 range. There's some skilled wingers, like all this stuff. Like you're getting probably a pretty good prospect, even if the Maple Leafs right the ship somewhat. I still don't see them being a team that by the end of the year, they've got the 25th pick, the 21st even. Like they got some deep flaws that I don't know how you kind of shore up in the span of this year if you're Toronto, which is terrifying if you're a fan there.
Yeah, and the idea of giving the Bruins another potential top 10 pick, after the Kessel trade netted the Bruins Sagan and Hamilton, which let's we don't have to go down that road of that trades and subsequent trades. But that's it's going to further compound their issues, and that was the shocking part of the Carlo trade for me. It was not the Bruins trading Carlo necessarily; it was trading him to Toronto and Toronto giving the Bruins a first round pick, which, at the very worst case scenario, I was like, well, it's going to be like 23 overall, probably, 23, 24 overall. Like, do you want to do that when you are moving on from Mitch Marner and you are in, you already traded that other pick in the Lawton deal, as you mentioned? Like, it's like, you're kind of running out of picks here, guys. You really want to make your competitors better. It was the same logic I had when the Bruins grab another pick out of the Korpisalo Ullmark deal, where I was like, you're kind of giving a division rival like a really good goalie,
a Vezina winner. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I don't like, you're going to be jockeying with them. I don't know if you want to not get another asset out of that trade as much of a corner as you were backed into. But, I think the corner the Leafs are backed into is the pressure of Toronto. Right. And it is funny, like talking to players who are like, I'd never play there. Like, I was like, that pressure, that shit follows you. That follows you every day of your life. And like, it does feel like that team just kind of has pressure on it every day. It just feels miserable to be playing in that organization.
I remember, I think it was a few weeks ago, it was after a morning skate and Fraser Minton was talking. It was like a bigger scrum, I guess, but like 7-8 people. And, someone asked him afterwards, I think it was, might've been like Pellerin or someone, of like, oh, is this still not as hectic as Toronto? He's like, you have no idea. You have like no idea how crazy it is up there. So you almost kind of feel bad for those players because they're already in a tough situation and it's only going to get worse. And the pressure is only going to ramp up, especially if they're going into some lean years where they weren't able to cash in on what their core is. So all good news if you're the Bruins, especially if they're getting a top pick out of this. So something to definitely monitor as the season goes along. If you're the Bruins, your focus is on your own team, but check those standings quite a bit, see how Toronto's doing, because that could help up the Bruins quite a bit come the summertime.
While we were talking, I just ran the Tankathon draft lottery simulator.
Oh, no.
The Bruins would get the 8th overall pick from the Maple Leafs, and they would take a 6'2" right shot, Daxon Rudolph out of Prince Albert. So there you go.
There you go. And again, that's a guy that could be in the lineup by a year or two and solves what we're talking about with your third D pair, if that's what the case, or your second D pair at that point. Like
we were talking about this. We were talking about this after the game off the air on Tuesday night. You and I,
buddies from Smallville, I believe, right?
We want one of those big corn-fed Manitoba Western Canadian defensemen. That's what I want. I want one of those guys. Who doesn't even train in the gym, trains in a farm, just throwing hay, throwing livestock. That's what this team needs.
You sound like Barry Trotz right now. He's watching all those things about Brady Martin. He was like, we need this guy. We don't need James Hagan. This guy's feeding the chickens at 4 a.m. Then it doesn't even skate. Doesn't even know how to skate. He's just a good country boy.
You need every cup winner has that Western Canadian big old farm strength defenseman. The Bruins need one of those guys.
Hey, they already got some guys between like Morgan Geeky is from a little tiny town up in Manitoba, I believe, and then Tanner Jeannot's from Saskatchewan. So they already got
Oxbow.
some of those guys. Yeah, Oxbow, right?
Yeah.
So I'm saying you get another one of those guys from out there in the middle of nowhere can only help your team. It does kind of make you feel like I imagine Florida is going to right the ship a little bit here once they get guys healthy again. But imagine if you had Florida's first round pick this year and like they actually like where are they on Tankathon? I know they started winning a few more games, but I think when I checked it on Tuesday, they'd have like the 11th pick. Like imagine if the Bruins had the 8th and the 11th pick beyond their own first round pick this year. Like how much again, you're probably not winning that Marchand trade because you're he helped them win a cup last year, but 11th overall pick for 37, 36 at that time, Marchand would be a pretty good thing of business for a guy that clearly obviously wasn't going to be here. So alas, there, I imagine Florida's going to be better, but
I just love the idea of the Bruins looking at like town populations, be like, nope, too many people, not drafting him.
No. We only need one watering hole. We can't have two. They can't be a 7-Eleven. They can't be any one of those. Can't have a Buc-ee's. Yeah, nothing like that. So
no, but it's true. Like I think the Florida pick, if I were a betting man, I would say that the Florida pick might be the one that they. I mean, it depends, right? How far they go, but that might be the one that you parlay into a trade, right? Like if you're trying to bring in like talent, right, and you don't want to trade your own first round pick, that's a pick you're trading, and you're
Rasmus
using that.
Anderson or
like you're using that to bring in like your version of like Rickard Rakell, right, or like the Hampelson home trade that you made in 2022. Like you're using it for more win now talent than say the player that you're going to be selecting with that pick. But at the same time, however, the Bruins, I would argue the Bruins' best picks as a franchise in the last, 10, 15 years have come later in those first rounds. Pasternak, McAvoy. Obviously, you have like other examples like Johnny Beecher and Trent Frederick, but I'm not just simply flushing that pick away thinking, oh, you're not going to get good value there. Like, no, you have in the past. It's just, can you kind of turn that trend back to what it used to be, if you're the Bruins?
And I think even if like Toronto, doesn't end up having a top 10 worthy pick, but like they end up, 15, 16, 17 or something, you get a lot of good value out of that. Like you look at what like Pittsburgh's been able to do the last couple of years with like Kindell was 13th overall. I think even last year it was not supposed to be the deepest draft, but like Pittsburgh got they got Aitchison, they got Eklund. I think that was them, right? Or was that the Islanders? I forget. But like those guys.
Yeah. I can't
but
remember
those,
right now.
Those were like prospects when we were like kind of going through the list of players of like, man, that's a good pick at that spot. And like this year's draft is going to be a lot deeper than that. So even if you get a pick like that, you're probably getting a useful talent. Look at Brendan Coots with Vancouver, who went 15th overall, almost made their team this year, right? Like at 18 years old. Like even if Toronto is rights the ship a little bit here, you're probably going to get a really good prospect the way this draft's going. So all good news for the Bruins. Ty, before we wrap this up, I'm going to take another quick break and shout out once again the CLNS Media Network. Again, please subscribe to our Bruins Ringside YouTube channel. Daily content between Poke the Bear, Bruins Beat, Pucks with Haggs. We have you covered every step of the way this Bruins season. Also, subscribe to the other CLNS channels, Patriots Press Pass, Celtics All Access. The crews there have you covered every step of the way for their seasons as well. Patriots on a roll, not stopping yet. Celtics, they're still up and down a little bit, but still a compelling team so far to see what they do, especially once the season carries on. And the crews for those two channels do a great job keeping you up to date and informed. So please subscribe to all the CLNS Media Network teams out there on YouTube. Before we wrap this up, though, Ty, big game on Saturday against Montreal. As I said, the league is better when both the Bruins and Montreal have maybe not true contenders, but like are compelling watches. Like people are keeping an eye obviously on Montreal and their young talent, and the Bruins have, I think, exceeded expectations so far this year. So another big measuring stick game, I think, for both teams. For the Bruins to go on the road against a team that is ahead of you in the standings, and for Montreal, it's a test of, they got punched in the mouth on Thursday. They lost 7-0 to Dallas. They have a couple of injuries now. Guys going to be out long term. How do they respond for a team that is extremely skilled, but is vulnerable on defense in net, in other areas of the game? So I think it's an early like game of the year watch, I think, for the Bruins as far as what this game could mean. There'll be a lot of things to take away from it.
Yeah, I mean, this is probably the first meaningful Bruins Canadiens game since before COVID.
Right.
I firmly believe that. Like these teams haven't been relevant, at least in terms of a head-to-head comparison, in a long time. You know, I would say arguably the most meaningful Bruins Canadiens game since Claude Julien went against Bruce Cassidy. Like that was what, 16, 17 when that happened. And so, you know, it's just been a long time since this rivalry has meant anything, right? And it would be great if it's a classic Bruins Canadiens game. Canadiens are still on fraud alert for me. A lot of overtime wins. 3-on-3 is a much different game than 5-on-5.
A lot of skill.
A lot of skill, but, you know, who's their fourth best player? Who is it? Is it Alex Newhook?
Oh, like he's out for how long is he out for now? Like a couple months. He fractured his ankle. They announced today. So
So I mean, like I think the Bruins and the Canadiens are very similar, where both teams still have a lot to prove before you're like, oh yeah, they're back. But in the head-to-head realm, this is the most important game these teams have played against one another in a very long time, and so I think that, you know, this should be good. Montreal is scuffling right now. They lost 4 or 5. Their luck has been horrendous. If you watch them, they're just not. It feels like they can't do anything right, and then whoever they're playing can't do anything wrong, right? So you can look at that one of two ways. Either that's going to snap on Saturday, and they're going to blast the Bruins, and it's going to be a nightmare, or it's going to continue, and you know, the Bruins going to get the upper hand on them. I will say this: I do like going in there after a loss. I like that. I think that it adds enough motivation on top of the regular motivation of Boston, Montreal. You know, Hockey Night in Canada, Saturday night at the Bell Center. I mean, what's better than that, right? You know, and so I think it should be a great game emotionally, and this is where I think this is what I like about Thursday's loss. They go down 2-0, and then they go physically in that second period. They were on top of Ottawa, right? Like it's like they got the message, and that's important to me. It's like, yeah, the streak is over, and that part of it sucks. But you go down early and you play the exact way you got to play to get yourselves back in the game. The emotional investment is there. I'm not sitting here going, is Marco reaching these guys? Like, I feel like Marco is reaching these guys. And you hope that with that in mind, he knows what to say ahead of a game as important as this game, be it, you know, as early as it is in the season. And that's what you hope for.
Yeah, I agree with like the perfect timing as far as, you know, coming off a loss, you're pissed about that. Also gives you a great opportunity to stop the up and down roller coaster of, you know, you win 3, you lose 6, you win 7. How about you lose 1, you bounce back and you start a new streak here, even if it means that they're not going to just keep on winning 6 out of 7, what have you. But let's win 3 in a row now. Then you lose an overtime game for once, maybe, and then you win. Like, start, you know, doing what good teams do as far as not be so up and down, I think is going to be key. And also, I think you look at the way Montreal plays, and they draw a lot of headlines. They're a fun team to watch. They're dynamic, but this feels like another team that, for what Marco Sturm has preached about what the Bruins need to do to be competitive, this is a team you look at them, you look at their tape and be like, yeah, we'll shut them down. We're gonna play our game. I think you look at how they played against Colorado, the game here. You look at the game they played against Carolina, and I think what's impressed me about and why I think this team has been fun to cover so far is that, one, I think the players are buying into what Sturm is preaching, but I also think there's a little bit of like a swagger as well as to how they're playing, of like, no, like, we're going to play our way and you guys are going to have to deal with it. We're going to punch you in the mouth. Like, and that's why you're seeing, I think maybe, I don't know if that's just a byproduct of having guys like Zadorov, but you look at that game against Toronto, where like, they know they're the more physical team. Yeah, you want to step to us, you're not going to win that fight. We were talking, you mentioned during the game on Tuesday of how many guys the Bruins have in their lineup that would be terrifying to go up against, whether it's VL, whether it's Zadorov, Kastelik, Janot, all those types of guys. And if the Bruins can kind of play to their strengths, you know, dictate the game against a young Montreal team, that's another step, I think, forward for the Bruins as far as like, yeah, you know, Toronto can get all the headlines. They can get all the highlight reels. We're the ones leaving with points because we beat the shit out of them. I think that's kind of a good litmus test for Sturm and what those guys are doing as far as buying in so far.
Yeah, that was the the comment I made was like when the game was starting to get heated, right? And Blay went knee on McAvoy or tried to, and Domi's going at Zadorov, and the Bruins make it a 2-goal game, and the game's kind of over. I'm like, not sure you want to do the street fight ending if you're Toronto, just given what the Bruins have in their arsenal still. Even with Zadorov in the box, I was like, they still have Vial, Kastelik, Janot. I was like, if I'm Toronto, I'm kind of like, no, let's not do it this way, guys. We you don't really want Janot all of a sudden just feeding, take your pick here, whoever it was, but
Yeah,
like,
McMahon, someone
yeah,
like
Bocelli or something. It's like that's a
Yeah.
mismatch. You don't want that. You don't
Punching
want
you
the
in the
5-on-5. Yeah, exactly. I don't want that.
No, you're not from Oxbow. You don't rep Oxbow like he does.
No,
So.
I do not.
Not
I do
Oxbow
not.
strong.
No. I think his nickname is like the Oxbow Ox or something like that. Like it's like a real nickname.
If it's not, it should be. If it's not, we'll start it. We'll go up to him and ask him about it. So
he just punches us like, I'm not Bocelli.
No, it's going to be a great matchup. We'll see kind of how the Bruins respond in this one. I think we'll all have plenty of stuff to take away from it going forward. Ty, before we let you go, where can we read your stuff? Where can we hear you on the airwaves? All that good stuff.
Yeah, you can find me at 985sportshub.com. We'll have you all your Bruins coverage as the season rolls on here, as well as other stuff. I know Patriots game last night, so a lot of Patriots stuff on our website right now. You can also hear me every Saturday morning on the hockey show, 9 to 11 a.m. on 985 The Sports Hub. This week I will be solo once again, but we'll hear from Bob Beers and Ryan Johnston as they will call and check in live from Montreal ahead of that game. So that's where you can find me. How about yourself?
Yeah, you can read my stuff over at boston.com and the Boston Globe. We have you covered every step of the way this Bruins season. Got recaps, features, columns, breakdowns. We have covered every step of the way. So please subscribe over on those two sites. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, you can at Conor Ryan _93. Ty, thank you once again for joining us. This was episode 377 of Poke the Bear. We're not going to end this one quite yet. We actually have a special interview with Mike Commito, author of the new book, Bruins 365, which will start right now. And welcome back to Poke the Bear. And right now we are joined by a very special guest, Mike Commito, author, hockey historian. His new book out, Bruins 365, released last month. You can get it online and in stores. And for Bruins fans, this is chock full of great stories. A lot of in-depth stories about Bruins legends you might know of. You know of the Oars, you know Eddie Shores, but you maybe not know all these stories that Mike has kind of compiled in this new book. So first off, Mike, how's it going?
Going great. Thanks for having me on the show, Connor. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, and congratulations on the book. I know you've done.
Thank you.
I know you've done a few different 365 stories before, whether it's Montreal, Toronto. Why Boston for this new one?
Yeah, so Boston, I had picked Boston. As much as that might surprise some people that know where my allegiances lie, I had picked the Bruins because there's a lot of local connections where I am in Sudbury, Ontario, which is about 4 hours north of Toronto. And we had a lot of guys come through Sudbury that played for the Bruins, Eddie Shack, Jerry Topazzini, who's a name that, is, I think, should be probably more familiar to Bruins fans than it probably is. But again, he was a great penalty killer back in the day. He was actually the last position player to go in net without goalie equipment when he subbed in 1961. But for me, after Jerry retired, he went back to Sudbury. He's originally from Coppercliff, which is just like a stone's throw away. He founded this bar called the Beef and Bird, which really pays homage to his time with the Bruins. They actually have the spoked bee as part of the logo. And then inside, there's tons of photos of Jerry. There's photos of Bobby Orr, Phil Esposito, you name it. They're all over the walls. And actually, Jerry's great grandnephew is Justin Williams. So there's actually quite a few Williams jerseys over the bar. But I spent a lot of time there on Friday nights. That was like the watering hole to go to in your 20s in Sudbury, which, if people know anything about Sudbury, there's not a ton to do. So like you were probably at the Beef on a Friday. And then they did this great thing on Saturday called Porchetta Bingo, in which you gambled for a pound of porchetta, which is Italian, pork roast. And it's delicious, especially because you're probably not eating much during the day. You're drinking a lot of beer. So it's like winning gold. So anyway, all that to say, like, that's the reason why I picked the Bruins, because I had spent a lot of Fridays and Saturdays in basically a Bruins shrine for much of my formative years. And then, of course, the local connections, again, more recently with Tyler Bertuzzi, Nick Foligno. Like, these are guys that that are legends of the community and have played for the Bruins. So it made a lot of sense for me. And yeah, so that's kind of why I did it. The publisher actually wanted me to do a Wings 365 first, and I said, let's do Bruins. We'll get to Wings maybe at some point, I'm sure. But if I'm gonna pick the next one, it was a no-brainer for me to go with Boston.
Awesome. Yeah. And when you look at the format of this book, I know it's Bruins 365, a story a day. What can Bruins fans picking up this book expect from reading through it? As far as, even from me glancing through it, there's just so many things that, so many stories that, to what I said earlier, you know of these legends, but you didn't know
Yeah.
that story or that story. Like, what can Bruins fans expect from this?
Yeah, I think you'll get like a mix of things. You obviously have like the formative and transformative moments in team history. Again, I think of like the Phil Esposito trade that obviously changed the fortunes of the franchise. You obviously have, June 15th, 2011. I think everybody knows exactly what date that would be. And then you've got other, notable trades. You've got big milestone goals that happened, but then you've got, I think, some of the lesser known stories or stories that might have been forgotten. Again, one that I didn't know about going into the book, and I probably should have because he was the first number that the Bruins retired. But Lionel Hitchman, who has his number 3 retired, he was the guy that played defense with Eddie Shore back in the 30s that really allowed Eddie Shore to be Eddie Shore and do the things that Eddie Shore was well known for. Hitch was kind of like, they didn't use the term stay-at-home defenseman at the time, but he was essentially that stalwart on the blue line that allowed Eddie to do the things that he did. But what I didn't know about Lionel and what he did with the team was that, he was an accomplished piano player. He had fly fishing records. He wrote poetry. He kept a pet bear, which I could have spent a whole story
Fitting.
on. Like, yeah, exactly. But like, what was that? I don't know what the bear's name was. How long did he have the bear for? I probably could have written, a whole other story just on Hitch keeping this pet bear. But his granddaughter Patricia wrote a great book about him, that probably details all that. But it's including, I think, some of those moments. And again, there's fun stories as well. Again, I think it's important to cover like the historically significant moments, but you can't have a book about the Bruins without including something about Ron Asseltine leveling the fan who jumped over the glass that day and made the mistake of thinking that he was going to give the ref a piece of his mind. So again, that's not historically significant, but anybody who was around in '89 for that, or anybody who's seen it on the countless highlight reels it's been on, you're going to include the fun moments like that as well.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think even look back at it's crazy how much things have changed where you look at you talk to players now about how like dialed in they are conditioning wise. These guys aren't
Mhm.
like ripping beer. They're like having like red wine every other day or something if they have to cut loose, and you look back at I remember the one story from the book about like Eddie Shore having to get up to that game in Montreal
Yeah.
and like didn't want to get fined, so drives in a blizzard, car spins out, and they have to like conscript like a bunch of horses to pull his car out of a ditch. Like it's not happening these days. I have to imagine it's going
No.
to be pretty rewarding to kind of find these sort of stories where you kind of have to do a little bit of double take. Like, wait, he did what? I have to imagine
Yeah.
that's pretty neat too.
Yeah, because like that story was initially that Eddie made it to the game in Montreal. He scored the only goal in a 1-0 game, which on the surface, like that's a cool story. I was probably going to include that for Jan 3rd, when we needed a story. But then it's like as you kind of dig through the newspaper coverage and you realize that he did all those things just to get to the game, and thank God that he did, because otherwise it might have been a 0-0 tie. Although at that point, they had overtime in the regular season because they hadn't canceled it yet because of the Second World War. Somebody might have scored, but ultimately, again, that just kind of shows how determined and how great of a player Eddie Shore was. But to your point earlier, like I think one story I came across that I think a lot of people probably know about the Jerry Cheevers mask, which is on the cover of the book. But to your point about like drinking beers and probably smoking cigarettes in between, like there was the origins of the mask. And I have a little bit of a story about it, is that he got hit in practice and he went to the dressing room. Coach went in there to discover him that he was in fact smoking a cigarette and drinking a beer, that he wasn't hurt. He was just obviously taking a rest. And so he drew a stitch on his mask, and that's how it kind of started to kind of show that he was in fact hurt and he needed that rest. But again, certainly that's not how players are spending time in between practice these days. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, now it's Theraguns. It's not cigarettes anymore. They're
Yeah,
switching
yeah,
things up just a little
yeah.
bit. And in terms of like all the work you've done to document all this stuff and find this, how long does it take for you to do one of these things? Whether it's that you got all these other teams that have so much history, like Montreal and Toronto. Like, what's the whole process of? All right, I want to do this kind of format. Like, what goes into it as far as just kind of combing through what I have to imagine is an insane amount of information.
Yeah, no, it's a labor of love. I'll say that. I spend pretty much like the better part of a year doing the research and the writing because of the way the book is formatted. I obviously know that I've got to write 365, but I'll say 366 because we have that leap year story in every book. So I kind of just plot a chart out, and I know that I've got to write so many of these by the time the manuscript is due. So to be honest, I probably spent more time with the Bruins last year every night researching or writing than I did, watching hockey. Although I tried to sneak in games when I could, but obviously when you've got to get this book out the door, and you're in there's a full slate of games that night. You may catch them later, but you got to put in the time to get that done. But I think by having done a lot of hockey history and sharing the stuff that I share on Twitter with the daily moments, I had a pretty good base of what I wanted to cover. But it is a lot of work to try to find what can I include for what happened on May 27th, and then in the summer months, those are a little bit more challenging because after you get through free agency frenzy, you get to the dog days of summer. What are we going to do? Maybe there wasn't a trade that happened that day. Maybe somebody didn't get signed that day. We have a couple bubble hockey moments from August of 2020 when the Bruins were playing at that time. But you got to get a little creative. You have to use birthdays here and there, and you can use the birthdays as a way to talk about a player's career that might not have otherwise been featured in a story earlier in the book.
Mhm, absolutely. And when you go through all these players you've documented, was there any player that you kind of gravitated towards, an underrated someone that, you maybe didn't know as much about, but then you started diving into it and really kind of stood out to you? I feel like everyone always loves like their bottom six grinder, someone like that. Is there anyone like through your whole research that really kind of stood out to you beyond the big names?
Yeah, and I mean, for Bruins fans, it's obviously a big name, but I think like Terry O'Reilly was one that really stood out to me because again, you've got a guy that could be that grinder, but also was contributing offensively, just like an all around player that I think embodied, the fabric of what the Bruins have been, since they were founded until present day. So again, I don't think that's a surprise because I think anyone that's a fan of the team knows, what he meant. But it's I think getting to really kind of get inside a lot of these moments with that featured these players. I think it gave me a better appreciation for them. Certainly to your point, like the players that loom large in hockey history, like Terry O'Reilly, like Phil Esposito, Eddie Shore, Bobby Orr, like everybody kind of has an idea or at least a connection to those players. But to really kind of dive a little bit deeper, that's what I always really enjoy about these books. Again, as somebody who didn't necessarily grow up cheering for the Bruins, I know who the big guys are, but a lot of these guys weren't household names for me. But I think you appreciate it more, especially as you go through the coverage, you see how people talked about them, how they revered them, how they're still held in such high regard. So I think being able to do a little bit more, get a little bit more understanding of those players really is, I think, always the best part of doing these books.
Absolutely. And when you look at the overall Bruins and the history they have, I know you're a Leafs fan. Was there a player that you were documenting that brings back bad memories? Was there any player that you couldn't stand that you had to write up a little bit about?
I think it's just like you go back and you remember like the Sean Corrali goal, the Jake DeBrusk had earned a Leaf killer reputation in the brief encounters that they had. I mean, it's one of these things where as much as like obviously these matchups have not gone the way of Leaf fans and for that franchise, but it's a grudging respect for these players and what they've been able to do, right? I mean, I think obviously Patrice Bergeron is somebody who I should probably detest and despise for 2013 and everything that he's done. But honestly, like how could you ever not respect a player like that? You could easily understand why he's so respected on and off the ice. But again, you kind of just there's definitely moments where it's a little bit, I think, cathartic and maybe therapeutic to write your way through some of these traumas. But again, I think what I try to do with this book is that not write it with the perspective of a Leafs fan who has baggage. I think you'll see a little bit of my soul in some of these stories where I fully unpack, how I felt on some of those nights. But I would never want to write a book, where in which I'm whining about all these things, and that gets old pretty quickly. So I think I was used my own personal experiences sparingly, but I think it does add a little bit of a different perspective to some of those stories, especially 2013.
Absolutely. And when you look at the Bruins and their impact, obviously here in the Boston and New England market, but where feel like they have pockets kind of everywhere. Even, talking to Bruce Cassidy, who's from Ottawa, said like he was a diehard Bruins fan growing up. What is it about, the team, the impact, and why you think like their fandom is so prevalent kind of all across the place, not just where you'd imagine like Boston and the surrounding states here?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I've thought about that a lot, like over the course of writing the book, and I think it honestly probably dates back to the original six era when there was smaller teams, and your hometown may have had a player who played for that team, and that was honestly a good enough reason to root for that team, even if it wasn't the team that maybe you started out cheering for. I kind of documented in the intro that like probably should be a Bruins fan for a number of reasons, and like my parents should be and were Bruins fans. Like my mom grew up in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, which is where Phil Esposito was from, and she cheered for the Leafs because her grandmother cheered for the Bruins. So it was kind of this household rivalry. But she should have probably switched to cheering for the Bruins. Growing up watching Phil Esposito in his heyday with the Bruins, and then my father, his parents came from Italy and they didn't know anything about hockey. And one day my dad came home from school and he said, all the kids are talking about, hockey at recess. I don't know, who to cheer for, or what's even going on in the NHL. And my nono said to him, well, find a team with an Italian on it and you should cheer for that team. And of course, no better Italian at that time to cheer for than Phil Esposito. So my dad was a Bruins fan as a kid. I think as he got older, just probably lost some interest in hockey. And then he met my mom, who's a Leafs fan. And I think he begrudgingly adopted the blue and white in the house. But it's every, I think, community, whether you're in New England or you're in Canada in some of these small areas that should seemingly not have a connection to the Bees, there's always somebody, right? And again, I just think now, like Nick Foligno, Tyler Bertuzzi, all the names I mentioned earlier, there's always something, or somebody who knows somebody, and that's a good enough reason. But I think ultimately, throughout the team's 100+ years, like it's just an exciting team, no matter if they're doing well or not. There's always some excitement on the ice, and so I think people gravitate to that. But certainly, I think having the pedigree that the team has had and having the players from some of these cities that are far flung all over the place, that pulls people in, and that's why they stay.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think in terms of, tapping into that community and documenting a team that has so many different stories, so many legends, so many guys that Bruins fans who've been watching them since 50s and 60s till today, they all kind of have that connection and that resonance for those types of players. And I think, Mike, you did a fantastic job kind of documenting that throughout your book. So again, first of all, I want to thank you again for having you on here. Again, for any Bruins fans who want to read Mike's book, you can find it online. I see it on Amazon. You can get it where books are sold. Bruins 365 is the name. We'll be sure to throw up a photo of it on the podcast as well. Mike, I want to once again thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your book with us. We really appreciate it.
No, thank you, Connor. Truly my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Great. Thanks. And that will do it for this episode of Poke the Bear. Again, want to give a shout out to both Ty Anderson and Mike Commito for joining us on this episode. Before we wrap things up, once again, want to give a shout out to the CLNS Media Network. Again, if you have time, please subscribe to our Bruins Ringside YouTube channel. We have daily content between Poke the Bear, Bruins Beat with Evan Marinofski, Pucks with Haggs. We have you covered every step of the way this hockey season. So please follow along, and also shout out to the great teams with the CLNS that do stuff with Patriots Press Pass, Celtics All Access. If you like Boston sports, CLNS has you covered every step of the way throughout their respective seasons. And again, want to give a shout out to Prize Picks, the best way to win cash this football season. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code CLNS to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Once again, this was episode 377 of Poke the Bear. You fans have a great rest of your week.